Hello everyone, how are you? Today we're going to watch the Carsat Crisis episode 4. Here again, Mr. Ian Kerr is with us in the studio. Hello Ian.
Hello once again, and thank you for joining us.
Well Ian, would you mind starting by telling us what's the major point of the story so far?
Yes, certainly. A carrier satellite was launched into space 14 days ago. That's Carsat. It contains space factories, 12 production units, and one of those units is producing K40, a vaccine. The European Space Operations Centre, which is monitoring the production, reports a problem. The main pump has dropped to half speed and the unit has shut down. There are 9 days left before total waste of money occurs, so the scientists and engineers must try and investigate the fault and see if they can correct it in that time. As part of the investigation, we learned last week a little of the chemistry of the production, and we saw why they must make it in space rather than here on Earth. We saw the planning of the production unit and were told why space shuttles now make space production economically possible. But of course we must remember this is a science fiction story and actually takes place in 1990. Episode 3 showed us by means of a flashback Professor Mary Edwards' discovery of the vaccine K40. And this is a vaccine to combat bilharzia, a particularly nasty disease that occurs in tropical countries. And then at the present time, where we are now in the story, the project director, Stan Makowski, is investigating the chemical process. And he's taken Mary to the laboratories of VPI, the company who are producing the base products, the polypeptides that they're going to make into the vaccine. So he believes there might be an impurity, which is what we're going to see today.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. So let's see the first half of episode 4.
Synthesizing a polypeptide at the moment. It is necessary to build up a polypeptide by bonding one amino acid to the next. The first step begins through here.
Harry, everything copy?
Oh, I think I know enough about the commercial process, thank you. Dan imagines he's going to find something wrong. He's wasting his time, of course.
Mary, I hope you didn't mind when I suggested you worked with him on this investigation. It isn't just that he requires the advice of a biochemist. In my view, he requires the help of an academic mind as well.
Yes, well, I'm afraid Stan is more of a doer than a thinker.
But perhaps it would be difficult for you.
No, it's okay. And you're right. You shouldn't get irritated.
He is under quite a lot of pressure, of course. His company has invested an enormous amount of money. His career could be at risk.
Oh, yes. His head is on the block. Well, maybe it is. But there are a lot of other people who've taken risks on this project as well, you know. First human volunteers, for instance. Hello, Danny. Have a good holiday.
Oh, just great. Lots of sunshine, lovely food. And my mother...
Oh, yes, of course, thanks.
So what's been happening while I've been away?
Well, the Institute has completed the toxicity tests on K40.
At last.
And we've had permission from the ethical committee to carry out tests on human volunteers.
Oh, good. We'll find plenty of volunteers here at the university.
At the moment, we only need 12.
12?
Well, 11 to be precise. 11 others beside myself.
You?
Oh, yes, of course. But would you sort it out for me, Almira? Yeah, I suggest we start on Monday the 20th. Okay?
You shouldn't let her do it. If it did turn out to be toxic, What I mean is she's too valuable.
Almira had wanted to be one of the first to be injected with K40. I told her that only one member of our research team should be a volunteer, and I had already claimed that privilege.
Good morning, Almira.
Early for you, isn't it?
No, it's just a bit cold in my room after Africa. I couldn't sleep.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Now you're here, you might at least do something useful. Don't know how you got your degree, the amount of time you waste. We'll be giving the first injections in about an hour, or had you forgotten?
Is it today?
I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the booster.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Hold on.
Right. My turn.
I still don't think this is a good idea.
Can't ask anyone to take a risk I'm not prepared to take myself.
Yes, but
It'll be all right. Come on.
that's strange.
What's the matter?
Well, it's gone.
There was no point in asking you. You would never have agreed.
I certainly wouldn't have agreed to your behaving unprofessionally. You know how strict the ethical committee is. They've every right to be strict. These tests aren't something you just do casually. Volunteers have to be specially selected and approved. How am I going to explain that you were injected instead of me?
You meant well, Mary.
Oh, I know he meant well. Of course I know it. The ethical committee is concerned with an approved code of practice, not with good intentions. Do you realize they could make us abandon our research project because of this?
I mean, surely they wouldn't.
But they could. Not going to be very impressed with my ability to control the situation, are they?
It was my fault. They should blame me, not you.
Well, I blame myself for allowing it to happen.
I didn't mean to cause problems, Mary. I'm sorry. Really.
I'd be even sorrier if it turns out to be toxic.
In that case, it will serve me right.
Once Danny had injected himself with K40, there was no point in turning back. We let him take a booster dose 2 weeks later and then tested his blood to see if K40 had stimulated antibodies. We put a sample of his blood in a centrifuge to separate the red cells. This gave us a clear serum.
Are you sure you have no symptoms of any kind?
Well, I had a headache this morning and a little dryness in the throat, lassitude. But I was at a party until 4 this morning.
Substrate, Almira. Danny's serum was tested in an assay to detect the specific antibody to K40. If the antibody was present, there would be a color change.
Mary, nothing's happening.
Yes, it is. It's turning blue.
That's it. You've got antibodies. Aren't you clever? As far as I could see, Danny and the other volunteers suffered no side effects as a result of being injected with K40. All the same, I thought it would be worth getting a second opinion. I asked a friend of mine, a consultant, to give them another checkup.
Danny? It's all right, isn't it? Oh.
Well, Danny's always teasing Elmila, and he sounds a great party goer, and obviously she doesn't like it, does she?
No, yes, he likes fast cars and parties,
Oh,
so I think
yes.
she thinks he's a little irresponsible.
Yes, well, today we saw the vaccine process, vaccine testing process, and there are several words, difficult words. I mean, human volunteers and toxicity test and ethical committee
Yes, that's
and booster. And perhaps you could discuss some of these terms and make the meaning clearer to us, please.
Yes. Well, before they can try the vaccine on human volunteers, on people, because so far they've been testing it on mice, of course, they must make sure that it isn't poisonous. So it goes through some toxicity tests.
Yes.
And having established that it will not do no harm to people, then they can run some actual tests with the volunteers. And they chose 12 people. Danny said it would be easy to find volunteers in the university.
And including one of the research members.
Exactly. But of course we noticed that Danny and Almira were not keen for Mary to be the actual volunteer, to be the person that was tested. They mentioned the ethical committee. Such a committee, a group of people, is very necessary to make sure that they don't do anything to endanger life or to cause pain or upset anybody's well-being. They actually mentioned the code of practice. And of course this is why Mary got so angry when Danny just went off on his own and decided that he would take the test rather than expose Mary to the danger of it. As she said, he meant well, but she was extremely worried that the committee, who would obviously want to know what they were doing, would feel that she couldn't control the situation.
Yeah. And how about the booster?
The booster, yes. Well, when the primary injection is given, first of all, the antigen causes, that's the substance, the K40, causes the antibodies to be produced within the human body. But probably it's not enough to produce immunity, to make the person, or to safeguard the person against the disease. So 2 weeks later, I think they said, they brought back the volunteers and they gave them a second injection. To boost something means to send it up higher, as in a booster rocket, or in this case, the booster injection is to increase or to take up higher the amount of antibodies produced, so that the immunity was in fact reasonable and would in fact safeguard them.
Good. And also they are talking about immune system. Do you remember?
Yes.
Immune system.
Well, this is the body's own...
something to do with body.
Yes, the body's own ability to fight off disease. And in this case, to reject or to kill and keep out this particular parasitic worm, which we call Bilharzia.
Okay, thank you. So I suspect that Danny and Elmira's relationship is developing because the next scene starts with them relaxing themselves, relaxing together on a picnic.
Yes.
So let's see the second half of the episode 4.
Coffee?
You think of everything. I wish I was half as efficient.
You have all the bright ideas. That's enough. I'm so glad everything's all right.
Well, we're all anxious to prove K40.
I mean, for your sake, too.
I didn't know you cared.
Of course I care.
Elmira, I shan't be here for much longer. Like you, I only stayed on at New Hampton just to see this through. Now it's finished, as far as we're concerned. I mean, it's up to the pharmaceutical people from now on, and...
Where will you be going?
to the Institute in Nairobi. In a few years, maybe when we have supplies of K40, then I'll work out in the field.
You won't be able to go to many parties then.
That's a drawback, I admit. Actually, I wondered whether you'd like to come. We could work together as a team. My idea is your efficiency.
I've also got a job to go to. Only got the confirmation yesterday. It's with Universal Chemicals at their laboratories in London. I'll be doing research into antigens.
Well, that will be very interesting.
Yeah.
Time to go.
Danny and Elmira left New Hampton soon afterwards to start their new jobs. Our own test with K40 proved successful. VPI organized the next stage, a field test in an isolated African village. The first step was to give chemotherapy to those already infected. We had to ensure that as far as possible the inhabitants were free from Bilharzia. Then, the entire village was given 2 injections of K40. The first dose stimulates a primary response by the immune system. The second, given 14 days later, is intended to boost immunity to an effective level. Once immunized, the villagers resumed their normal lifestyle, with its attendant risks of infection. The medical team worked in the village obtaining samples for tests. The whole process lasted many months. In the end, the results were conclusive. Danny came back to England to carry out research for the Nairobi Institute, and I arranged to meet him.
So, the field trials were successful.
Yes, isn't it marvelous?
I always knew they would be.
Well, then you knew more than I did.
Mary, what we need now is commercial production and lots of it.
And DPI are making plans. Well, they're having trouble with one of the bondings in the polypeptides, but they'll get round that. How are things getting on at the Institute?
Fine, thanks. We've got some good people and... Elmira.
I asked her to come. I thought you might like to see her again. Hello, Elmira. Nice to see you. Sit down. I'll go and get another cup.
Oh, no, I'll go.
No, you, talk to Danny. Well,
Well?
How are you
getting on?
I'm fine. How are you getting on?
Oh, fine. I often think about the old days at New Hampton.
All those parties.
And other nice things.
I misjudged you, Danny, in those days. I'm sorry. Hope you forgive me.
You're forgiven.
I've been thinking a lot lately. You once asked me if I'd like to work with you in Nairobi.
Yes?
Is the offer still open?
A letter from Elmira not long ago. She and Danny are married,
Oh, wow.
working in the field. They say they're hoping for supplies of K40.
I think we're all hoping for that.
I think Dr. Markovsky is impressed.
Well, that's nice to know.
Now perhaps he will look at the engineering systems.
I hope so.
Let's go.
Well, it's nice to see that Danny and Elumila have got married and worked together in Kenya and hoping for a supply of K40.
Yes, I think Elmira was prepared to admit that she'd misjudged him and he wasn't all parties and fast cars, I think.
And I think she has got a job in London in a pharmaceutical company.
Well, she had, but
Yeah.
of course she's given that up to join him now in
Yes,
Kenya.
and Danny came back for another research to England.
Yes, that
Yes,
was,
and I think Mary is a matchmaker, isn't she?
I don't know whether that was intentional or not.
Okay. So, getting back to the story, I mean, could you explain what they did in Africa and why they had to do that, I mean, as a field test?
Yes, well, of course, once they had tried it on volunteers, this was really under laboratory situations.
Yes.
And in order to see whether the thing would work in the environment for which it was intended and for the people for whom it was intended, they have to go outside the laboratory. We call that working in the field. So therefore field trials or field tests
Oh, the same
were
meaning.
carried out. Yes. And in that case then they would go to the actual situation, and it mentioned there that they must be certain before they test the vaccine that the people they're testing it on don't have the parasite. So I think they mentioned chemotherapy.
Yes,
And
chemotherapy.
this means giving them drugs in order to kill off any parasites that would be present. So they start with a population who are free of the disease, and then they gave them the primary injection, and 2 weeks later a booster to raise the immunity,
Yes.
to boost the immunity. That test, as we saw, was successful on a large scale and proved that the vaccine worked even though perhaps the temperature was higher or the people may have had a slightly different response to those that they tested in the laboratory.
Well, we go back to the first part of episode 4, and they are talking about
Centrifuge, yes.
centrifuge,
Correct,
and
yes.
red cell and serum,
Yes,
and you know, in order to separate.
quite. Well, in order to see whether or not an antibody
Yes.
was produced, was present in the blood, they have to test it for a color change. You can't test blood for a color change if it's strongly colored, red as blood is. So they must remove the red blood cells. The technique used was centrifuging, which meant spinning it extremely fast, and the heavier red cells drop to the bottom and leave the clear part of the blood behind. This is known as serum. So that's what they were talking about there.
I see. Okay, so is there any difficult words? Yes, serum and centrifuge, and also, do you remind us of well, you talked a lot about antibody and K40 and antigen, but still, you say these are difficult words.
Well,
so
I can go over that certainly.
yes.
The Antigen is the substance that causes or promotes the production of antibody. The antibody is the substance that we want the body to produce to fight off the disease. The antigen causes that to be produced in the body.
Well, at the end of the flashback, I think Stan realized that the chemical process doesn't have any problem at all. So, I think, well, Mary was right.
Yes, in fact, Mary's prediction was borne out. She said at the beginning of the episode, when she was talking to Prunier, the Frenchman with the moustache, she said he will not find any problems there, and in fact, I think he was prepared to admit at the end that the chemical process was all right.
And by the way, Prunier has a French accent, does he?
Yes, he does.
Yes.
It's, as we discussed in an earlier program, I think this series has been designed so that there are many different nationalities involved, and you can hear different accents, so that you can see how different words come over with those different accents. It's quite difficult.
Yeah. For instance, Danny's English is rather difficult for me to understand, and
yes, he has some expressions which are
and how
little
about
strange
Ella
to me.
Miller?
She has, I would say, very much a London accent. She was obviously brought up around that area. Very similar, I suppose, to my own accent.
Okay, so that's all for today. See you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.